analyze the policies being implemented today that will shape our future tomorrow. Hosted by Brianna Sagdahl, the editor of Dakota Leader, a policy news publication focused on a trans-partisan approach to illustrating the tones of gray in an increasingly black and white world. Found at www.dakotaleader.com, the Dakota Leader is home to political orphans and those brave enough to question partisan rhetoric, in an attempt to find common ground regarding the world of South Dakota's policies and political dynamics impacting your kitchen table. Today we review the headlines and highlights from the week. This show is made possible by our member donations and Washington Crossing, Sioux Falls' premier retirement community, Big Splash Dunk Tanks for all your party needs, Mick Baruth of Baruth Financial Services, Mike Clark Show Pigs and Buller Farrier Services. Find us online at dakotaleader.com to learn more.
Hello and welcome to the Dakota Leader. I'm Brianna Sagdahl and I'm joining you here today from my kitchen table to discuss the issues that are impacting your kitchen table. And really excited today. We have a very special guest, Speaker of the House, Representative Spencer Gosch, who is the former Speaker of the House for the South Dakota State Assembly. And we're going to be discussing the week in review. I just wanted to quickly highlight and go over some of the top stories that have been happening in South Dakota this week. On, let's see here, excuse me. On August 31st, Circuit Court Judge John Pekus ordered a temporary stay for Lincoln, Minnehaha, and Pennington counties. He ordered them to maintain all of their election materials until after a court case could be heard. Now, for those of you not familiar with this case, essentially what's happening is a group of individuals from across the state have filed public records requests, and every single one of them were denied. The public records requests pertain to election materials from the 2020 election, federal election, and the most recent statewide election. And the group of individuals appealed the case, and they requested from the circuit court to have the election materials preserved, as there is a 22-month deadline where county auditors are then supposed to destroy all of the election materials, I'm sure for safety and very reasonable reasons. However, that deadline would have been today, September 2nd. And so the judge has asked on the 31st, he ruled that all of 3 counties would need to preserve their election materials until he could hear the case regarding the public records request. Yesterday, he ruled that all counties in South Dakota would need to preserve the election materials. So the Dakota Leader is a firm proponent for transparency in government. We do not condone that the election was stolen, nor do any of us necessarily believe that, but we do believe that people across this country are very concerned with the state of election integrity, and so we do stand firmly behind the transparency and compelling transparency in that process. Also in the news this week, South Dakota, let's see here, South Dakota Republican Party leaders attempted to terminate the voting rights of precinct committee men and women. And now I'm not the best with the party, so maybe my guest can help explain this process a little bit better. I had to get a lot of guidance to write this article, but we were sent a recording of a meeting that happened on August 27th. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. And in this meeting, we had the Central Committee who was proposing to terminate the voting rights of precinct committee men and committee women ahead of the next Republican convention. And the convention is where statewide delegates, or excuse me, scratch that, statewide candidates are nominated. So that would be pretty impactful. So we'll touch on that a little bit. And also today at 1 o'clock, the Freedom Caucus is hosting an election integrity meeting with county auditors and the public in an effort to maintain openness and transparency related to the materials, the circuit court ruling, and also have open discussions. And I think that's really important. And so before I go on, I'd like to introduce my guest today. Representative Spencer Gosch is from the Mole.
It was the first bridge across the Missouri and South Dakota. And we ran out of names, so we just said Mo and Bridge.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to have you on. Representative Gosch, you have been just wonderful and very informative. So I have learned a lot just from listening to your floor speeches, and you'll say things and then I'll hear it and I'll know to go and look it up and to reference it. And you just have such a large breadth of knowledge. And so I want to thank you for being here today. And I'm really grateful. I'm hoping that maybe you can explain a couple things that are happening across the state a little bit more. Let's start out maybe with the internal party politics. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a registered Republican. I really don't understand how the party works here. But it sounds to me as if there is a group that's pretty unhappy. This is the story that I understand. The Central Committee has had power, and they're the sort of group that's the status quo, if you will. And ahead of this last convention, as I understand, or as I've been told, there was a large turnout of grassroots type of individuals who were elected for PCP or committee man, committee woman positions. And so those individuals cast their votes, and it created this huge upset where the Secretary of State was actually bumped off for a new nominee going into this general election. And the Lieutenant Governor, Larry Roden, almost lost his seat, as did Governor Noem's choice for Attorney General, which is Marty Jackley, and he's obviously the former Attorney General for the state of South Dakota. And so this group decided that they were going to try and amend the bylaws. Is that right? Can you walk us through that process and what exactly it means?
Yeah, so I'm not exactly very well knowledgeable about the issue that you're talking about. This is kind of new to me too. Oh. I could tell you what we've been hearing in the background, right? Okay. Now you're right when we talk about establishment politicians, and there was a grassroots movement. What you saw in the last primary election, especially when it came to Republicans, including my own race, was a large attempt to remove certain conservative Republicans from the ballot or from the legislature in order to put more of an establishment type individual in there, somebody who would be much more willing to listen to what they're told to do. And that particular fight ended up making some people very, very upset, very, very angry that that's what was going on. So they decided to run for precinct committeeman and committeewoman. So in every party, in every county, if your party's organized, everybody that's an elected or that's an appointed on the committee in that particular county for the Republican Party gets to come and vote, and then you can run for the precinct committeeman, committeewoman of your position. And then, of course, there's the at-large position too. But let me remind you that this is what I find extremely disturbing about their move to remove them, is those are the only individuals that are elected by other Republicans in the county. Okay, I'll rephrase that. As a committee man, I had to put my name on the ballot, and every Republican in my precinct had to go vote for me to get there. So essentially what troubles me from what I'm hearing is that we've got the establishment wanting to ensure that they don't go through the embarrassment that they went through. And they did. It was an embarrassing day for Governor Noem and for others that have been establishment and party status individuals. They felt embarrassed and they felt slighted. But what they're proposing is to take it away from the people. Now, there's going to be a twofold approach because you're going to see this as well. As we've heard that, Senator Lee Schoenbeck is amazing at being loud and not keeping things very close to the chest. He has said that he's going to be bringing legislation to say that these individuals elected can no longer be elected by the party. They're going to go on the ballot, just like everything. We're going to go popular vote. And what that'll essentially do is it's a twofold approach. It'll get rid of the party. I mean, it'll do away with the necessity of a party. You'll go in and you'll put an R or a D behind your name, and there's really no point of being involved otherwise. So any of the hierarchy in the party will go away because his intention is to just make it a popular vote. Quite much like the U.S. did with the 17th Amendment on senators. Different history lesson. But so those are the concerning things that I have. First of all, they're going to try to take it away from a vote of the people, and then they're going to just try to take it away from a vote of Republicans and at the convention. So these are constitutional offices. There will be constitutional amendments. We'll see exactly how they try to do it, but I would expect that legislation to come this legislative session. Wow.
And will there be enough votes, do you think, to stop it?
It's really hard to say with the general around the corner. There's a lot of Republicans right now in the legislature that stand for freedom, and they stand for making sure that the people's voices are very solid. They would be considered a lot of the conservative, the true conservative Republicans, not the ones that throw the brand when it's time to run for re-election, right? We all know those people. In fact, I won't mention names, but I saw an ad for an individual, and I'm known for being very upfront. If you want to know what I'm thinking, just ask me, I'll tell you. So I saw an ad for one of the individuals, and I remember shooting them a text and saying, why would you put this ad out there and your face on it for your opponent? Because I don't consider them very conservative. But again, it was a joke and it was lighthearted, but at the end of the day, all jokes have a little truth to them, right? So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. There are some really good legislators that are coming back, and there are some new ones that will be running. I look forward to it. Unfortunately, depending on the tactics that are used, and when we talk about somebody like Schoenbeck, who's the president pro tem of the Senate, he's got his tactics where he stacks committees, they get out of the committee, they get to the floor, threats are made, promises are given, deals are broken. So it probably and more likely will end up being something that the House will have to stand up against.
Fascinating. And I think that's something so important that the general population or public doesn't quite understand, which is that leadership within the legislature itself and how it operates and why it's so important. For example, with the Senate pro tempore, who then assigns committee seats, or like the Speaker of the House, who decides where people are, committee seats, for example. Just the different roles. I think at another time, I would love to do a show just on the roles of individuals within the legislature and how those political dynamics and roles play out. I think it's important for people to understand, and especially people who want to go to peer and, testify maybe against a bill such as the one that you're saying we'll most likely see, or maybe they want to have a hand in drafting legislation. Maybe they're a daycare and they have an idea for something new, who knows. But I think it would be great to help educate individuals at a future time in another show. Thank you so much for breaking that down. And so so changing subjects and switching gears a little bit here, you had mentioned that there's a group of, true conservatives who are, in the legislature, and there's a newly launched Freedom Caucus, the South Dakota Freedom Caucus. And to my understanding, that mirrors, sort of like the House Freedom Caucus in Washington, D.C., right? And so would you consider that group to be sort of that conservative holdout, or is that something different?
Well, the group's going to be, it's a pretty small group currently at this particular point in time. I do consider a lot of those individuals that are in that group a conservative holdout. I don't know. Here's my problem is, why do we need the group? And that's my problem is I get a little problematic with why we need the group. And the reason they feel we need the group is that the Republican Party, or a lot of the Republicans, have gone away from the Republican platform. And guess what? They're not wrong. There are too many Republicans out there that were literally Democrats as of 2 months before they handed their petitions in, and then they ran anyway. We've got Democrat legislators they have got an R behind their name, but they clearly were Democrats. And if you look at their voting record, they still are Democrats. But in order to win in South Dakota, you have to have an R in front of or behind your name. In fact, there's one district where one individual ran twice as a Democrat, failed, then changed to a Republican, and then got in. I don't think they've changed their voting record at all, but ultimately that's where they're at. And you'll see that a lot when it comes to politics. And that's the tricky part about politics. And that's what I like about these conservatives, these conservative individuals. And what I mean by conservative is just somebody who thinks that the government works for you. You have constitutional rights. You shouldn't be forced to anything should be forced on you when it comes to government. We have a constitution for a reason. And you should be protected from government overreach. There are a lot of people that like to beat their chest on that, but they're not voting that way. And that's what we need to see change. And that's why the people that joined or started the Freedom Caucus feel disenfranchised by the Republican Party. And in many ways they were.
Thank you. That is really interesting. Well, and so I'm hearing similar complaints on the opposite side of the aisle. So the Republican Party here in South Dakota is certainly the dominant party. And at the same time, the Republican Party here, the establishment Republican Party here in South Dakota, it's unlike any I've ever seen. In fact, it operates very similarly to the Oregon Democratic Party. I digress. My point is, Republican parties from state to state are not the same. Neither are Democratic parties from state to state. Some of the issues, core issues tend to remain the same, but how they operate, the dynamics, and where the members stand, towing the line, etc., all of those things are vastly different. It's been a very interesting experience for me going from reporting in Oregon to now reporting in South Dakota and starting to understand how these, differences line up. But I want to say I'm also hearing, like I said, these similar complaints from the Democratic Party who feel disenfranchised. And, we have a very large voting bloc who feels sort of similar. And I'm going to segue into our next headline about the voter integrity issues. You hear a lot in maybe either mainstream media or maybe some alternative sources that the Republican Party engages in voter suppression. And I never really believed that until coming to South Dakota. And I'm hearing these arguments on both sides of the aisle, right? We have this group who tried to file public records requests and those were denied. And then we have the ACLU representing the tribal leaders and Indigenous individuals or Indigenous people in South Dakota, and they're frustrated because their voter registrations are not being properly recorded, regardless of if they're moving or if they're registering for the first time. And you could go along the arguments either side, that it's discriminatory or that it's selective registration or upholding of the law, either against conservatives or against Democrats or whatever it is, right? My point is, we seem to see these same sort of threads weaved in through the arguments on, both sides of the political spectrum. And what I noticed is the federal judge who had ruled in May on behalf of the ACLU and the tribal leaders, what he said is that the Secretary of State needs to do more post-audit, more voter roll auditing, and he needs to be engaging in more training for auditors and agencies. And that really resonated with me because that's exactly what I've been hearing from this other group, the South Dakota Canvassing Group, and also, the new grassroots nomination for Secretary of State, Monet Johnson. I got to sit down with her recently and have an interview with her, just kind of discuss, her platform. And that's exactly what she said. And it's interesting because 3 of her kids are Native American as well. So maybe, maybe she understands that issue a little bit more innately than others. I don't know. But I have certainly witnessed the establishment Republican Party stifling individuals who are either running or, I definitely witnessed that in the last primary where some people were not allowed time to speak. Some people were not promoted equally. I think that's really fascinating. And now you're saying that not only did that happen, but the governor actually tried to replace you and others this last primary. And I think that's really fascinating. So it really seems like a lot of these issues are more or less stemming from this party in power, if you will, and both sides are saying it and seeing it, but I think there's some division and a little bit of complicated rhetorical divisiveness happening there. But I mean, honestly, I guess my whole point in conclusion here is that I'm hearing the same complaints on both sides about the current establishment GOP here in South Dakota. And so I was hoping that maybe you could elaborate just a little bit more on who it is that people should be listening to. You had mentioned, they want more individuals to come in that will listen. Who are those sort of driving forces that people are not listening to currently? Are there lobbyists? Are there large industries, corporations? Can you elaborate a little bit more on sort of what the driving force is behind that?
Well, there's a multitude of driving forces. I mean, at the top hierarchy, it would be the governor's office, the executive branch. She's going to want you to vote the way she wants you to vote, period. And that's fine. Under Governor Dugard, he was the same way. He wanted you to vote the way he wanted you to vote. Well, I want you to vote the way I want you to vote too. So there's nothing wrong with that, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. It's what you do to get that starts to cross a few lines. And when it comes to promises or getting involved in cannibalism of your own party, and then being shocked that you have a grassroots movement jump up against you, what do you expect? Ultimately, what do you expect? You're going after individuals that have represented these districts, community members, family members, right? You're going after these individuals and you're trying to tell their family and friends and the people that they've worked for, by the way, and when we talk about legislature, for little to nothing, they've worked for and fought for all this time. You're trying to go into their house now and say, you were wrong, listen to me, because they don't like me. I mean, come on, to me, it's a little elementary, and in my particular case, they were successful, but ultimately that was also part of the plan. After becoming the speaker, I had a lot of soul searching to do. My children are just getting into high school. I've enjoyed serving the people of District 23. I really, really have. They are some of the finest people in South Dakota. Absolutely love all of them. But at the end of the day, am I at the stage of my life where I could take a break, spend a little bit more time with my family, and then get back into it, right? And when we came to the conclusion, or when my wife and her family came to the conclusion, am I going to run again? We decided, look, there's a lot of people in this district that depend on you. You have to at least put your name in the hat. And by doing so, you will divert a ton of funds from the establishment Republicans, funds that will not go towards some of these legislators that have a long career in front of them and that are great legislators, great conservative legislators. And that's exactly what happened. Our estimation is about $120,000 was spent on my race between the governor's office, Lee Schoenbeck, and a Pack and Heat, which is run by Deb Peters, used to be Sadaho. When we start talking about lobbyist organizations, right? She's known for raising money and she was always a little bit more on the liberal side anyway when she was in the legislature. So, these are the individuals that are going after because they're establishment types, and they're shocked and they're angry that their choice didn't get picked. So when you talk about going after individuals, it's all about, oh, well, you can run, but you're just not good enough because you weren't who I chose. right? I mean, that's just the way it is. And if you want to take a look at even the individuals, and that even backfires, and I think that's funny, and it's a huge testament to some of the individuals that were appointed by even Governor Noem that eventually fought hard against her at things like the Women in Sports bill, right? When she vetoed that. They fought hard against her on not stopping vaccine mandates, and they were the individuals at the end of the day, as we say, one of 29, that stopped her from shutting the state down on veto day. We killed those bills in the legislature. They were one of the 29. And I know she likes to take credit for it, but there are a lot of people that know otherwise. And the proof is there. Go read it. We don't need to hog this show when it comes to that. But yeah, that's what we talk about, a lot of the establishment types. Now, these individuals, again, the executive branch is big. And then also they want some of the people in leadership want you to listen to you. I was never that type. The majority leader in the House was never that. The minority leader, current gubernatorial candidate Jamie Smith, we always ran a little bit different of a ship in the House. If you disagree with us, that's fine. We'll have that fight and we'll have it on the floor. That's fine. We're still family. We're still going to be kind to each other. We're not going to cannibalize ourselves. So that was always, a good thing about being in the House. One of the things that I liked. Some of the things I've heard from the other side is do this or I will remove you from your committee assignment. And that happened. Some people lost their chairmanships over in the Senate because they weren't doing what they were told to do.
Oh, that happened all the time in Oregon. The Democratic Party is almost more or less monolithic in the state of Oregon. And Tina Kotek, for example, was the previous Speaker of the House. She's now running for governor. And, and she is famous for yanking people off of their committee assignments and twisting arms. I mean, I have watched representatives walk out of hearings, come back crying, just tears pouring down because they want to vote differently and they feel so convicted of it, but they have been literally threatened with money to their districts. I don't know if that happens here, but that is pretty common actually in Oregon. People are threatened with all types of things during cap and trade, and I know this is anecdotal information, but it's just really interesting because during cap and trade, the governor went to every single one of the Republicans who was holding out on the legislation and offered them, I think it was something like $22 million for their district. So do things like that happen here in South Dakota? Is that more or less what you're alluding to, or?
I would say more so in the last 4 years than ever. It's become kind of a DC status quo type thing that happens. I've always said, and there are a lot of legislators that believe this, I don't want people to get down on the system because we still do have fighters there. There are a lot of people, and my famous one of the cliche sayings I've been saying for the last 6 years I've been in was, I have 25,000 bosses, and not one of them lives in Pierre, South Dakota. My district is up in the north. They are my bosses. I don't care what anybody says in Pierre. I don't care what the big money lobbyists say. And if they want to throw money against me, they can throw money against me. Ultimately, for $13,000 a year, which does not cover expenses, I'm going to go down there and do what they want me to do because I want to serve them. And when I walk away, I want to know that I always followed principles. I always followed my conscience, and I did what was right, and I fought for them. And ultimately, they were successful. I am walking away, but I can say that. I could say that to this day. I could feel very confident and comfortable about that. And if I decide to run in the future, I don't know what the future holds, but I'll continue, and I still am. I'm technically the speaker until January 1. I'm still working for the people of District 23. I'm in constant contact with a lot of them. CO2 pipeline, one of the big issues that are going on right now, and landowners' rights, which has always been a big issue for me. I'll continue to fight for them and work for them, even if I'm not in the legislature. I'm here to do because I feel honored they sent me there. I feel like I owe them something back, and I'm going to keep doing that, regardless if I'm getting paid or not.
Thank you. You'd have my vote if I were in your district. That's a good speech. Well, let's switch gears a little bit. Do you want to maybe give us some updates on the CO2 pipeline since you've brought it up? I came across a very interesting article about an individual who's very heavily involved with the CO2 pipeline and has been lobbying for it, from what I understand, and that would be none other than Dan Lederman, the chair of the South Dakota State Republican or Republican Party. I don't know how to say that. I'm sorry. I'm not a party person. I do policy, and I'm kind of a nerd in that way. But yes. So do you have any updates maybe on the pipeline or where it's headed or anything like that?
Yeah, one of the main things, I'm not sure exactly where policy-wise, it's kind of in the hands of the PUC at this particular point in time. You're right. And this is where I get a little bit nerdy in terms of being constitutional. Dan Lederman is one of the lobbyists for the Summit Carbon Pipeline. And now do I like it? I'm going to say no. Is it wrong? There's a giant question mark there. The party doesn't exactly give him a living wage. He's got to go do something on his own. Dan Lederman in and of himself was a legislator at one point in time, and he's now a lobbyist. He works for Saudi Arabia. I mean, he's got a lot of big clients that he works for at a national level and at a local level. And ultimately, that was known when he was elected as the party chair. I mean, we knew he was going to be, that he was in that position. So here's the one thing I want to say, and I always promised everybody I'll always tell the truth. Sometimes it gets me into trouble, but at the end of the day, I don't care because I don't have to worry about following lies, right? I can say that I've had multiple conversations with Mr. Lederman on a separate note, not about the CO2 pipeline at all, and he's always been in the best regard in terms of doing his job as the party chair. Right. He's never held it. I've been a large opponent of the CO2 pipeline for multiple reasons that we'll discuss here. But when it comes to Dan Lederman, I can honestly say, and this might not be for everybody. I mean, look, to each is their own, but I can honestly say he has not ever inflicted the one job over the other. So I don't hold that against him at this particular point in time. Now, when we come to the fight on the policies, yeah, there we go. Now him and I are on opposite sides. We're not on the same team anymore. But my issue is more of a landowner's rights issue. I've always said we went through, a few years ago, it was the non-meandering waters issue where the waters are flooding up over the top of farmland. Is that my land still? Can somebody access? Let's say there's a lake that flooded. It now comes up to the next to my farm. They're ice fishing, shooting fireworks off, drinking all night right next to my house. Is that right? Because that was my land. Do I have the right to remove them from that position? That's quite in a nutshell what the non-meandering waters fight was all about. Okay. So, but during that process, we came to the conclusion that, chances are if you bought the land, you don't own the mineral rights. So you don't own what's in the dirt. Okay. Now, anything above 500 feet, you don't own what's above it. Right. We found out you don't own the water on the land. So you don't own what's on it. So you don't own what's in it. You don't own what's on it. And you don't own what's above it. If you don't pay your property taxes, it's going to be taken from you. Okay. So my argument was, do you own anything? I mean, what are we doing? Are we just paying an astronomical price to exchange dirt into different hands so that I have the right to pay the government rent? Right? I mean, that's just my weird whack job conservative voice talking.
No, I mean, I've wondered that myself. And that's actually one of the reasons why we moved to South Dakota is because technically you're supposed to be able to own what's underneath.
Yeah, and if you get the mineral rights, you can. That's really not a government thing. But I mean, just oftentimes people don't sell the mineral rights. In fact, I had an idea for legislation that I was going to look into that forced anybody who owns any right, whether it's an easement or a mineral rights on that property, that they were going to partake in part of the property tax. Because ultimately, I mean, if I don't own the full value of the land because they find oil in it, now all of a sudden you get to go get the oil, then why do I have to pay property tax on that, right? So that was an idea that I was contemplating bringing if I made it back. Ultimately, that won't happen. But so what do you own? You own the right to exclusivity, right? I can tell you stay off my land. You can't hunt there. You can't do anything in South Dakota anyway. I could say stay off my property. Now that doesn't apply to government officials, right? It kind of does. We can say, hey, you got to get a search warrant, or we have certain Fourth Amendment rights to due process. But when it comes now to this pipeline, what they're doing is they said we're going to come through, and if we got to use eminent domain, we will. That's what they said at the beginning. Now they've changed their voice, and we've heard on the radio stations that anybody who ever said that's been fired. We're not using eminent domain. So that's supposed to make you feel warm and fuzzy. We want to work with you. We want to deal. We want to. And then they turn around and say, but we're going to sue you if you don't allow our surveyors on the property to survey your property. So you're going to tell me that you're not going to use eminent domain to take my land from me, but you're going to sue me to take that last right, that right of exclusivity away from me. I mean, I technically don't have the land. So, I mean, you see where there's a bit of a contradiction there. So then you fast forward to, I'm just talking about landowners' rights. I'm not talking about pipeline. To me, it needs to be whatever they want, but if you don't want it, you shouldn't have to have it. So let's talk about what it is. Now, the oil pipeline, if an oil pipeline went through, I would, as a landowner, I would say, yeah, that's fine. If it messes up, you better clean it up, right? I mean, they do a pretty good job of reclamation, whatever. That's fine. Go ahead. Water pipeline, fine. Power, electricity, fine. I'm not one of those anti everything, right? I get that we have to, if we didn't have eminent domain, me as a farmer wouldn't have electricity in my house, right? We just wouldn't. We wouldn't have power lines to our house. So I get it. There's a level and a grade that's got to be. But when we talk about a CO2 pipeline, they only have to bury it 3 feet, although they are applying for a 4-foot permit. But I'd have to see the permit because a lot of them say if they run into obstacles, they can raise it, right? Well, the federal minimal distance is 3 feet. This is a high pressurized CO2 pipeline. When you disturb the ground for the next at least 5 years, that ground's going to be softer in the spring and in the fall. Because if you get moisture, the ground gives, the first place frost will come out of is there, so it'll be soft. I've buried my tractor and grain car more than 3 feet. So if I bury it on top of that pipeline, what kind of damage? I mean, I don't think I'm going to survive it, number one. I'll probably die. But I mean, if I'm next to the farm, do I kill my wife and my kids? If I'm next to town, do I kill the town? These are serious things that these farmers are worried about. So they're saying, no, we would just rather not have to deal with that. But they're trying to strong arm them into wanting to do it. At the end of the day, we got to draw a line, right? As I said, with all those rights and all those things that we don't have anymore as landowners, the landowners got to stand up and finally say, enough's enough. You're either with us, you're against us. Look, there's not a lot of people that get rich off farming. I know everybody knows somebody that does. But I can tell you that out of the community that I know in the farming community, there's not a lot of rich guys farming. They're just trying to feed their families. And at the end of the day, they're trying to keep their grandpa, their great grandpa, his land in the shape that it was in before. And especially in my country, I always like to say the only person that's touched that is God. That ground is God and maybe some bovine and a few buffalo. We like to preserve some of our land. And it's just a hard thing to do when these people come in and say, nah, we're going to take it from you because we can profit. And might I add, this is a private company for profit. This is not a public company. Eminent domain is strictly says for public use for the betterment of society or the public. But they're trying to say off of an old case way back when that this applies for their company. It's going to be a fight. I would rather they do things the right way, tell the truth, just be upfront with people, offer them a decent price for land. If they say no, go around it. Simple as that.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And on the surface, it seems like a good idea to sequester carbon in order to offset the cost of things like ethanol type fuels or renewable type fuels. Do you see the potential for carbon being used in the future for farming? Do you think with the way that it's being stored, is there a potential that it could be used on the other side, or is it just being sequestered?
Well, I'll tell you right now, I am using carbon to farm. That's what plants eat, right? That's ultimately, at the end of the day, what we're doing. When it comes to storing it, the only use that they've used this CO2 form in is getting oil, right? In fracking. It can increase the efficiency of fracking by 10 to 20%. So it can get more oil out of the ground. They aren't currently using that. For that reason. When we talk about ethanol, though, the reason they want, what they're selling it to people is that we're going to open ourselves up to other markets like California, Canada, things like that, right? Well, California's already said by 2030 we're not going to sell. It's going to be illegal to sell a gasoline-powered vehicle. That's okay, so that's gone. So we're going to talk about, and then we're going to talk about Trudeau from north of here. Yeah, that guy's a nightmare. I mean, I don't know where he's at. He's a coherent Joe Biden, when you ask me. Maybe it was a little mean. I'm sorry, but they're trying to go in the same direction. So what are we doing? We're ultimately making the ethanol process more expensive, right? And what happens when the administration changes or the powers change and they weren't greased by the Summit Carbon Pipeline, or they're not benefiting from it? So they decide to cancel it like Joe Biden did with the Keystone Pipeline, right?
I was just going to bring that up. That's a really good point.
So what happens then? We don't know. We've got a pipeline to get reclaimed. You know, are they going to use all this subsidy dollars to do this? Not to mention their last, Senator Kramer out of North Dakota likes to call it this. Their last inflation incentive package, which is going to blow up inflation instead of try to help inflation,
right.
Just gave them another $40 per metric ton. So are they changing any of the landowners, the current, contracts that they have? Are they saying, well, since we're making more money now, are we going to change that at all to their kind? No, they're not. They're not going to change that. It's still more profitability towards them. So it's just a slew of bad ideas. I don't think it's a good idea. What I do think is funny is if you want to talk about green energy and we talk about ethanol. Ethanol is a renewable energy source that currently works in our vehicles, that the infrastructure we have. It burns cleaner. Now we're building a pipeline from these ethanol plants, right? Why not let them pump ethanol? Why not get ethanol out there? Why are we still shipping it on the railroads? And the reality behind the fact is, and most of you will know this, is because the railroads donate way too much money to political people. That's it. That's the bottom line. They're going to make money off of shipping ethanol. It is what it is. So that to me is the number one problem with this. If you think about it, it's like, well, we've got a renewable energy that burns cleaner in the vehicles we already have. We're going to build a pipeline. Why not ship ethanol through that pipeline? Well, because it doesn't fit my political rhetoric. I can get more votes off of saying that we're going to make CO2 go away. And yeah, I mean, it's preposterous, the things that they're trying to do. Yeah, it's an interesting world we live in.
Fascinating. Well, I think that's a really great segue point for Biden's speech last night. Did you happen to catch that?
Parts of it. Yeah, parts of it.
I was shocked. I got a Twitter notification, and I think it was maybe the Babylon Bee or something like that. It was like a satire post, and it said that the president had been booed on stage during a dark speech, and so I thought, oh no, what is happening? So I went to watch the speech and try and understand, why the president of the United States would be booed on stage. I mean, that's concerning, right? And then I started to listen, and I thought, now I understand the satire. This is very concerning. The president of the United States of America is othering 75 million people and isolating them. I mean, some have even said it appeared that he declared war on these quote unquote MAGA Trumpers. And I thought it was interesting the way that he, or his speechwriter, weeded out these, MAGA Trumpers by saying, Democrats, moderates, and what did he say? Like reasonable Republicans, something along those lines, right? These MAGA Trumpers are the biggest threat to democracy, and that was along the lines. And I was shocked. I think that's the first time that's happened in my memory. It did remind me a lot of the unvaccinated speech when he said what he did about the unvaccinated. This president seems to have no problem with othering and using entire groups of individuals as a scapegoat, which I find very ironic because supposedly, Trump was the fascist. I digress. Anyways, I was wondering if you had, caught that, if there were anything within that speech that, potentially concerned you, and how, that might impact South Dakotans.
Yeah, there's so many ways I could go here, and I hope I end it in the direction I want to end, right? One of the statements in his speech kills me. Why do you think you need your guns? You don't have F-15s. Yeah, it's what you need. That's what you need. Seriously, I'm not kidding. I believe is what his words somewhat were in some sort of. Well, if that's the case, if you need F-15s to win a war against you, which, by the way, are going to be retired shortly, the F-22 and F-35 is probably something he hasn't read about yet, but the F-15 was done back in the 70s. It's going to be gone. The F-22, fifth-gen fighters of the future. Anyway, so he's talking about needing F-15s to be able to take him on. If that's the case, then why did a bunch of Stone Age individuals that still throw rocks in Afghanistan take him over and beat him? And this, by the way, today is the anniversary of the day that he left 13 American soldiers back to die. Today is that anniversary. It was a despicable move. And if that's all you need, then why is it that he himself, his administration was able to get their butt kicked in Afghanistan? So don't tell me that. All right. Number one. Number two, it's unconstitutional to even threaten to use military force against the citizens of the United States of America. And that's in a roundabout way what Joe Biden did today. The first time any president has ever even come close. We've heard, everybody talks, and you mentioned Trump was the fascist, right? Everybody talks about how his tongue was so harsh, and man, he hurt a lot of feelings and all those mean tweets. He never threatened to bomb, nuke, because at one point in time, one of his speeches, he brought up nuclear weapons. He never ever mentioned nuclear weapons when it came to his opponents domestically. Okay. He's never said those words. So we are at a different level. I mean, when you're talking about President Biden, and he needs to be very careful on where he's treading, because he is inciting riot type mentality when it comes to the individuals in America that are really, really at their wits' end. Okay, these mega Trumpers are individuals that are sick of the lockdowns. They're sick of the government mandates. This is not what our country was founded on. Okay, this was not what it was founded on. We had a few select individuals that gave up their fortune, their property, and many of them their lives because they were sick and tired of exactly what we have turned into today. Okay, so don't sit there and throw at us this republic and the mega Trumpers. These are Americans with feelings. Now, as a politician myself, I'm a conservative Republican. I have Democrats call me all the time. I have liberal Democrats contact me all the time. If it's a cordial conversation, we have great conversations. And in fact, we come to a lot of agreements. But when it comes to, being forceful, or all of a sudden we need to turn militant towards each other, that's where the problem is. Now, we started this conversation talking about the inner turmoil of the Republican Party, and I was forward with you, and I talked about how we have issues in the Republican Party, and there are some serious concerns about establishment politicians, so on and so forth. Well, guess what? It's the same thing in the Democrat Party. What we as Americans need to start doing is, I need to stop hating you because you're a Democrat. I need to stop attacking you because you're a Republican. We need to quit this crap. They want us to continue, and you can call me a conspiracy theory all you want, but they want this fight.
Look, that is the mission of the Dakota Leader. That's what we're founded on, is finding this common ground. I mean, because all of us that write for the Dakota Leader, honestly and truly, we are political orphans. I thought I was, I come from the far left, right? And I thought that I was a liberal. Of course, I'm more of a classical liberal and believe in classical libertarianism. And then, the party completely shifted. The issues changed. And all of a sudden I found myself being more of a moderate or even a conservative on some issues. And so I have to say, what I have noticed, I don't think you're a conspiracy theorist at all. What I have noticed, in fact, is that both sides of the political spectrum are actually talking about a lot of the same things. Here in South Dakota, let's just focus on South Dakota politics. There's different terminology, there's different talking points and different buzzwords that are being used. And what's even funnier is that both sides of the political faction, whether they're left or right, they're actually wanting the same things. But then they're attacking each other based on, a buzzword or a talking point. And so you'll hear one word, like parents' rights, for example, and that will trigger somebody, and they'll go off and they'll assume something. But then another person will say, I really want to see a return to funding and education. I really miss when we had SHOP and we taught economics, and so both sides are really talking about the same thing, just in different ways. So please continue. I personally think you're right on the money with that.
Well, and that's, and if America ever woke up and quit that, the powers that be wouldn't be the powers that be. You know, if you take a look, and a lot of it starts with journalism and media, as you brought that up. A lot of it starts there, and that's of course why you're doing what you're doing, right? And I appreciate that and applaud that, because a lot of it started, if you go back to World War II and the history, propaganda was a big thing. All of the media was controlled through the government. The government got to say what you reported on, and they pushed an agenda. Now in World War II, did it work? I don't know, wasn't there. But ultimately we won the war. So I suppose things were good. You fast forward, you know, and all of a sudden the press started changing things. And the first televised and truly televised war was the Vietnam War. Things went a little rough there. Okay. Let's call a spade a spade. The media found out that they have some power, and they started to utilize that power. And it was a select few. There weren't a lot of big media out there. Well, then all of a sudden the government got onto that. And so what did they do? They started to try to control the media, right? They started to talk to the media, and these are your talking points. You guys got to start to push the agenda. Fast forward to the Biden administration, and he does away with the FCC regulation and requirement of truth in reporting, right? That's no longer in the law. Nobody knows that today.
I mean, 2013, I found it. I actually went and I dug, and it's buried in the Defense Act.
Yeah,
it's the defense spending budget, and I can give you those documents because I found them. I have them.
Yeah, so that's not there. It still is required by local printed newspapers, though, as they are regulated under the post office, which is another weird story, but it's all true. So, I mean, if you want facts, you got to go to your local newspapers to get them anymore. But now fast forward to today in social media. Now the government has a problem. They cannot control the ideas and the fact that people are having conversations, and some people are rising above the cream. They really are. They're having those conversations. And I'll point them out. I don't watch his stuff, but I see clippets of it. Joe Rogan's one of them. He's just an American. I don't think I'd put him in any camp. I don't know where that guy is on anything, but he rises above it, and he has candid conversations without screaming at each other or swinging, hands at somebody. He has candid conversation with people, and they hate him for it. They hate him for it because he's not following a rhetoric, and he's not trying to continue that hate between each other and the division. So now what do we have to do? We have to switch over to scare tactics. We need you to just absolutely, unquestionably trust the government, because it's COVID or it's monkeypox or China's going to bomb us or Russia's going to bomb us or whatever. At the end of the day, we've got to control our own lives to some extent, folks. It's not all about the government. It's not all about the media. Turn your phones off, turn your TVs off, go do your thing, get engaged in your local politics, talk to your local politicians, make sure they are the people who you think they should be, make sure they're voting the way you think they should be, and make an educated decision when it comes time to vote. And that's it, bar none. And by all means, go back to what your grandma said and be nice to everybody, always. If the conversation gets heated, walk away. It's enough of this. We need to stop yelling at each other.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for that. And I know, nobody's perfect. We all get drug into the mud at times, but I think those are fantastic aspirations. And I hope that we as Americans can unite behind those basic principles and start to realize that we actually have a lot more in common than not. Just like, the issue with the election integrity on both sides of the aisle, people are noticing that there are problems, and today. So I just wanted to end on that. Today, in about 7 minutes, live from Pierre, the Capitol, there's a group of lawmakers who will be hosting a live informational meeting between county auditors, the public, and whomever wishes to call in. So it's either in person or remote. And that link can be found on our website at www.dakotaleader.com. If you'd like to tune in today, make sure go there, click on the meeting link, and it'll put you right into the meeting to watch. I know I'm going to be there in the next 6 minutes watching myself and taking notes. And with that, I would like to say a big thank you to our guest today, Representative Spencer Gosch. So grateful to have you on.
Thank you.
I hope that you'll come back. I would love to have you back on. I think we're about to have a commercial break coming up here soon. So I'll just end by saying thank you again to all of our members. We are 100% member supported. Please make sure to go to our website, donate, make sure and support the type of media that you want to see. Take back your power. Thank you so much. Have a great day.